Hello, everybody. Today is a May 16th edition of the MSP Initiative Live. Thank you for joining us after being off for a week or so here. We are back and in Technicolor. So hopefully you guys can join us again on a regular cadence, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time, and of course, 24 hours a day online. At mspinitiative.com. And I am going to share a couple things with you and do some general housekeeping, and then we'll get into the good stuff. 1 second. All right, so a couple of housekeeping items that we do at the beginning of all of these sessions. mspinitiative.com, this and every other session we've ever done is available under sessions. So you will be able to see that in podcast and video format. So whichever is better for you. We have an MSP Community Minds event. This is our first in-person event of the year outside of parties, August 14th and 15th in Denver. Here are some people that are joining us already as expert speakers from around the sandbox on various topics that we will workshop you through rather than just PowerPoint you to death. There's a couple of more that we're bringing on board, and then we'll be able to get into the good stuff. So if you are interested in learning on all topics from around the community and want to actually get deeper, then hey, maybe you should oughta, sorta, shoulda, coulda, woulda think about X. This is the right event for you. Absolutely free, other than you have to get there. So check it out, MSP Community Minds. Of course, we have our community block parties. Last week we were in Prague. First time, this is our second time we've gone, into the EU and UK for events this year. Was a pretty cool event, and thanks to the team at Enable for their Empower conference for including us, right, and being able to allow us to do that. We have upcoming block parties all ready to go. DattoCon in Dublin. This is the last week of June. So if you're even from around the area, I hope you're going to the conference. Even if you're not, you can still join us for the block party. So feel free to register as an MSP and join us. We have the MSP Community Boat Party. This will be in conjunction with Taylor Business Group's big conference in Fort Lauderdale. So if you like South Florida and you want to network with other MSPs and you want to go on a cool boat party down the Intercoastal, this one is for you. Of course, we have DattoCon Miami, which will be in proximity to the newly minted Kaseya Center. But this will be down in Florida again. As we know, a lot of events happen down in Florida. Surprise, surprise. We should have something pretty cool baked up for this one. And then lastly is the MSP Community Block Party in Orlando. As you know, this is the big one that we've done at the end of every year. Last year, we had the All-American Rejects. That's right, Ben, you heard on the radio over and over again as our entertainment for the evening. We are working on a new option for this year, but very excited to maybe have this one without hurricane force winds as we worked our way through some interesting weather last year. All being said, it worked out pretty well. So that is a cool one. Those are the block parties between now and the end of the year. Hopefully you can join us. They're pretty good time. Second to last, community offers. These are where vendors from around the industry have put in like special offer for the community. Feel free to check them out. I know there's a few more coming as well. And then lastly is our industry calendar, where we're just trying to take all of our homework and put it in one place. And if we've missed anything that may be happening out and about, go ahead and submit your event here, and hopefully we'll be able to get you onto the schedule. So as you can see, we try to make this a little bit interactive so that everybody can jump in, and hopefully you guys will be able to run into us somewhere along the way. Again, to anyone who joined us in Prague last week for the Empower conference, and by the way, a lot of Americans were able to get over to that side. Pretty good time. I'll give you some trivia. Ready? The city of Prague has approximately 1.3 million residents. So let's call it, a little smaller than the size of Philadelphia proper. That's outside of Philly. Of the 1.3 million residents, how many people have a registered vehicle inside the city? Anyone want to guess? Nothing? 1 million vehicles. It's a lot of traffic in a small area. So I thought that was interesting. And they claim, as I've heard this several times last week, that the Czech Republic consumes more alcohol than any other nation on the planet. And I'm like, how is that possible? The United States, for example, just population density alone, how could that be? Well, I got my answer. Alcohol is cheaper than water over there. So there it is. Everybody's drinking all the time, it seems. But anyway, without further ado, I think one of our guests for the day, David Stevenson. Are you with us today, David?
Yes, I am.
Welcome. How are
Good
you
afternoon,
doing?
everybody.
Awesome. So yeah, I don't know how much beer you drink, David, but yeah, Prague is the original kind of birthplace of the Pilsner style beer. And apparently all other Pilsner beer that have since been created were, taken from the original blueprint that they created over there. I thought that was cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, so was able to get into some interesting stuff over there. But anyway, I digress. How are you doing today, David?
I'm wonderful. I'm actually was away for the weekend in Virginia. I'm located in Tampa, Florida, but I'm outside of Richmond, Virginia, and I'm excited to have this discussion today.
Awesome. Well, for anyone that hasn't run into you or your company before, would love to, just get a little bit about your background so people can understand where we're coming from, and then we'll get into the good stuff.
Oh, certainly. So we are a technical recruiting firm as well as an MSP that specializes both in providing MSP talent in the MSP space as well as in the defense community. I've been working recruiting as well as in the MSP space back and forth for about 28 years myself. We typically, what we're known for is our speed to market. We typically average a 2 to 5 day business turnaround with vetted talent that is typically hired within about a 2-week period of time. We have a process of matchmaking talent with the right organization. So that's kind of about what we do. And it's an interesting time we're living in post-COVID, and retaining and getting talent these days. So that's kind of what we do. That's my specialization.
Awesome. So we had someone on from Service Leadership, now a ConnectWise company, not too long ago. It's called a couple weeks ago, and we had an entire session like this about the proper blueprint of how MSP should be set up and how to properly balance cost versus position, and making sure that you're not overpaying for certain departments and roles, and how to properly incentivize people, especially if they're in a non-sales role, and what the best way to do that is. And we got into all these different kind of permutations. Of course, the good people over at Service Leadership have an entire kind of consolidated report on where the averages are, and how the trends are by role, and how these MSPs are broken out based on size and volume, and are you, depending on market, spending the right amount or overpaying? And we got into all this stuff. But one thing is for sure, and one thing keeps on coming up and bubbling up to the top of the radar for I don't know, the last 20 years for me at least, is whenever we ask or we hear or we see the polls of MSP saying, hey, what are the top things that you're worried about, concerned about, issues that are affecting your business? Now, sales and marketing always end up there, and somewhere in the top 3, 4, 5 things that always are in the top 10 is talent, whether it be retention of talent, whether it be bringing more net new people into the business. And it seems like this thing never goes away. Good times, bad times, it doesn't matter. One end the coin is still, one side of the coin is always a problem. So I don't know what the right answer is, because maybe there is not one size that fits all, probably the case here, but there seems to be, at least now, right? Rewind a year ago, I think we're in a completely different place now. Maybe you'll tell me otherwise, but today, what I see is a lot of very expensive people, or at least they're asking to be made very expensive people in terms of salary requests, that we're working for big names, recognizable names that are on the street. All right. Big data, big tech, whatever you want to call it. And like, they are kind of square peg round hole with IT and managed services companies that largely wouldn't, deal with more enterprise customers on the regular, right? So like there's, maybe not the right fit there. So I would love to maybe start off and pick your brain on, not too long ago, I think the market was different. I'd love to understand what you see from now until then, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Well, I think the biggest difference that happened was COVID to lay the landscape out. Historically, we had regional salary models, that those regional salary models determine wages. What happened, I believe, is we were forced or shifted into national salary models. So there was overhiring going on. We all saw it. And then we saw the Great Resignation. Well, there's a common denominator, and that's remote work. And so a lot of people are going to say, well, that doesn't impact me because all my employees sit on site. Well, no, that is directly impacting you, because now you're indirectly, the wages were increased. So now we have a lot of things. I think the other reason why we're starting to see a lot of firms letting go is, I've already seen it personally, is their runways to being able to get work and get paid on that work is longer than historically that they could manage to handle it. And so you see that element. You also see a lot of technology being integrated across the board for elimination of redundancy. I get called every day on tools that are going to eliminate resources in our organization or in any of our clients' organizations. You get a call every day about it. And the reason being is wages now, I feel, are about 20 to 25% higher than they were historically pre-COVID. So now what you're still seeing is these people actually really can't even take less, because indirectly we've seen inflation, which has now boosted everything up. So the cost of living is so much more. And that's because all of this is, I think, all pitting around with that shift of the realization of remote work on a national level. Or the remote work and the salary models being as such that we're seeing it increased it. So we've moved away from a lot of this looking regionally to being forced to look nationally. And your skill set that wasn't targeted is targeted. Maybe you're in, I don't know, Orlando, and now your talent is being targeted from California rates. So that's a lot of the things we're seeing. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of folks back on the market and a lot of the organizations that are much larger that aren't applicable, because your talent is still I believe, still in high demand for the MSP set. Does that kind of give you an insight a little bit?
No, it does. I mean, so a couple things that kind of back your thought there. So I know that they had already announced a prototype, but I saw just the other day that in Texas, they opened a fully autonomous McDonald's. No human beings at all, right? Like totally automated, whether it's drive-through, whether it's walk-in, like you as a customer can walk in and sit down, but like there's no human beings there. So like,
doesn't surprise me.
It's here. And then the other one was, and I know probably this won't be a popular comment for some, but I saw a Fox News session, with the CEO of Kaseya, and his position was that the reason that all the big tech companies are, and larger enterprise companies that started cutting by the double digits in terms of headcount is because this years-long project of automation and digital transformation and all this other stuff has finally come to fruition, right? Like they've been working, and now it's here. And now when the going gets tough, they're like, hey, these positions aren't needed anymore, right? We've already finished, the project that started in maybe 2018, 19, 20, finally got to the end of the rainbow, and we're here. And it just so happens that, hey, markets maybe not be doing well, but hey, we might not need to do this because we've already finished our work. Do you think that that's the case?
I think that's part of it. I also think that transformation and the bringing in of that technology has eliminated duplication of work. There is a lot of duplication of work that has existed previously. And I also think I don't even think I have clients today that are 20% below market in what they're paying their existing staff. So, and then so they're going to have to bring that up to market standards. So what happens is you're looking, I got all this overhead I got to eliminate because I've already put automation in place. McDonald's is a great example because the cost for everything has gone up. So they're still trying to keep their profit margins, but without totally gouging the client at the same point in time. We're in a very awkward predicament. So yes, I think that's part of it, but I also think it's the realization that they had a lot of roles that were not necessary, plus the work that was being done. And now the runway for projects that are coming in the door for these clients might be longer, and they historically might have had a longer runway being able to front that cost. They don't have it today. They have to let go faster because the cost is higher. And so it's not a simple one thing.
Is it do more with less? I mean, because, here's the problem, right? If companies need to continuously bring more people or net new people into the organization, or even just backfill the positions that are open, don't you run into a chicken or the egg, right? Like, you're paying everybody that's working really hard X. Now you're going out into the market to try and find people to fill these chairs, and you're finding out that now you have to pay more than the people that you already have. So like, how does that work? Because at some point, isn't the inevitable conversation come up saying, hey, what are you making? Like, you hope that they don't say that, but it's at the water cooler. It's going to come out.
Yeah, it's going to come out. And I think the other thing that you're alluding to is that companies are having to make a salary alignment adjustment.
Okay.
And bring everybody internally up, because you can't. And I just saw it with one of our clients. They had a cybersecurity resource. They're paying X, like 105. Well, the new talent's coming in at 125. Well, the manager that's managing that talent is only at 110, 115. You can't have an employee making more money that's being managed by someone else. So companies are having to make force alignments to readjust to the economy and readjust to the salary margins that are existing. So you got that going on, and that's a big challenge. So imagine you have 300 employees, and now you have to make an internal adjustment to market rates. So it's a very complicated situation. And then what happens is you're letting talent go, knowing that you can't afford to let it go, but you don't have the runway any longer. So we're seeing a lot of that going on.
There's a finite amount of money, right? So like,
and that's the problem.
You go back, you have to raise salaries for everyone across the board. At some point, you run out of money in the piggy bank. Somebody has to get cut then, right? Because like, this is part of it. And then here's the other problem. Like, doesn't that really then push people into saying, well, let's find a way to outsource some of the roles then. If we can't fill them here at the rates that we need to pay, do we go into this outsourcing model that we've heard about forever and ever and ever to backfill some of the roles that we have because we literally can't pay for it?
Well, the chance, you have to be very careful when you go outsourcing, because there's nearshore or offshore, and those come into play. I mean, there's a real big challenge when you offshore a solution. Are they going to be able to catch the technical nuances of your clients and really be able to service it right? Or is that going to open up another Pandora's box for you? With now you're going to have to bring in the sales guy to fix the problem, and your higher level technicians in as well. So I think what we're in a unique situation. There isn't a right answer or a wrong answer, as you said from the start. It's being aware of what's going on. I think why we're seeing such cuts in certain key roles is because they know the other key roles they're going to have to bring up. So I think I personally believe a lot of the projects, like you mentioned, are being eliminated because they're done. And they are trying to look at roles that are the least likely, if let go, going to impact the organization, so they can open up. The other thing that's going to happen, and I'm seeing it happen across the board, we all are, inflation's hitting every one of our customers. So we're having to raise rates. Everybody is. And that's an unfortunate circumstance, but that's what's happening. I mean, we have every tool we use as a recruiting company has increased by, I've seen it about 20 to 25%. And we're just
Wow.
like, yeah, I mean, and so the tools are increasing for our being able to access them, and then retaining the recruiting talent there's a cost for that. So there's just an overall cost increase. So we're, as an organization, constantly looking at how do we refine our process. I think organizations are going to have to get a lot more selective on
Mm.
who they bring on as a customer too, because if it does not fit in their wheelhouse, if it doesn't match the wheelhouse and you're trying to cram it in, and historically you might have been able to do that. Today, I know we as an organization are getting more and more particular about who we bring in. And that's why we refer to this matchmaking, because we want to make sure this is a good client. So when we find the talent that has a very short shelf life, they're going to move, because and so the MSPs are facing the same thing. If a client isn't fitting into their sweet spot of what they do right, you're going to have to look at being more selective about who you bring on and the business you do, so that it closes faster, so you can keep that personnel engaged. So that's another dynamic too in the thought process.
So I can tell you for a fact that my companies have adopted remote work in the mid 2000s, right? Like this is
Mhm.
way ahead of time. This is pre 2008 financial crisis, right? But the pandemic maybe woke everybody up to saying, hey,
Mhm.
we can hire from anywhere now. Okay, true. Although that comes with some complexity. It's there.
Yep.
Um, there a little bit of there's two forces, in my opinion, that crash together with this idea. One, the speed in which you can evaluate someone, train them, like get them to absorb information, is dramatically delayed because you're just not all in the same space, right? Like that whole
Mhm.
bullpen office kind of feel. If it's not there, like there is a adverse effect to that. And then secondly, some people just are really not effective, self-managing their time, right? Like if they're working out of their home and they're not very diligent about making sure the stuff that they need to gets done properly and on time get done, then all of a sudden you now have this delayed thing that's happening, this slow down of information transfer and learning, and
Mhm.
you may have somebody that's just really poor when it comes to working remotely on their own. So doesn't all of those dynamics make it just really hard to successfully do the remote thing?
I Well, here's what I hear. We're talking about collaboration is not as effective remotely.
Hmm.
And we're also talking about self-discipline, and your staff and your labor force is
Hmm.
not there. So I want to say argument, my solution or my answer to that is yes, that is happening. However, I think that happens because there isn't an effort upfront to correctly matchmaking and identifying and understanding the talent you're going for. So it's the mistake I see that's out there today, and I see it every day. And I can go pull up my emails. People approach me for jobs I have no business doing. And this is the problem with external recruiting today. I get approached to be a developer or a technician every day. And I'm like, you see a buzzword in my resume? That's the problem. Most of the recruiters aren't properly trained. I actually trained my recruiters because I was a recruiter. I worked in the MSP space. I know the pains you guys are feeling. And the problem is people aren't taking the time to, when I say matchmake, is disqualifying all the noise in regards to the opportunity, making sure you have a very fine, clear picture of what you're looking for in a resource.
Hmm.
And you're vetting and screening through that several times in the interviewing process before a candidate even goes to a hiring manager. The basic steps should have been screened for. You should understand, hey, well, how have you worked remotely in the past? Or how do you collaborate? So you do these things, these steps up front, and that starts to eliminate some of these problems, even to the point where you're checking the references. Everybody's going to give a reference, and they're going to be great references. You know what I learned? It's how you ask the person the right questions in the interview. And one of my clients taught me and gave me a tool for doing it. And everything I'm doing is probing on, well, why would you rework with them. What was it about their work? What was it about their leadership? More importantly, where do we help them grow and evolve? So we're constantly looking for the deficiencies in the candidate to help. Oh, and I don't know if the deficiencies or the opportunity for growth to really understand where this candidate is coming in at. Also, understand what where the organization's going to need them to pick up the slack. So doing matchmaking is setting a realistic expectation. But I think if you do the upfront homework when you're recruiting and interviewing, and you're not taking 3-4 weeks to make a hire, because the really good talent is not looking. You're going to have a firm or a recruiting internal department that's out there hunting for the talent, going and pulling that talent when they're unhappy. Because here's my experience. People don't leave jobs because of money. They leave jobs because they're unhappy. Money is just a byproduct. If they're happy, and I mean, money, there's something there. And if he was offered $40,000 more, well, he wouldn't even been looking or listening if he felt engaged and enjoyed what he do. He might listen, but there's a less likely situation. I hear that argument all the time about money, and I don't think it's a money issue. I think money is a byproduct issue. But I think the challenge we're facing today is if we do a little more due diligence up front and have good, clear lines of communication with your HR department or the internal recruiter you're working with, or external, and you make sure that those folks truly understand what they're looking for and hunting for, and make sure they're properly vetted before they walk in the door, and you give the tools to the candidates to vet the opportunity. That's the other thing. It's a two-sided situation. I'm very passionate about this. And I think, here's a statistic from our standpoint. Most people are shocked. Our talent that we've placed just in the defense, because that's what we've been measuring for like the last 2 years consistently. Just out of curiosity, what do you think the retention levels are for that? Just throw out a number.
What technical people that work in the defense industry?
IT people that have been placed in just the defense. And I mean, it's the same challenges we're seeing. I mean, overall about keeping talent. What do you think percentage wise from 1 to 100?
50%? I don't know.
Here's what the crazy part is. Because we do this and the way we do it, we're witnessing a 97% retention level year after year. And that's because we're doing the homework up front. Because we're not, I'd rather give you 1 or 2 resumes or 1 resume and you say it's no good, and I go back and I massage it. So we're much more about having quality over quantity. Our folks end up staying, and they end up being into leadership roles because of the vetting process.
I heard somebody say a stat, David, a couple of weeks ago on that call I mentioned with service leadership, that like they're seeing technical talent like 50% retention rate, especially like help desk frontline facing level 1, level 2, level 3 guys or girls. So why is that number so dramatically different?
I think it's because they don't create a runway for them. They don't create a pathway. They get discouraged. They feel stuck. And that's why the efforts up front to understand what their long-term objectives are and enabling them to qualify an opportunity up front. I do a lot of this with, students coming out of school, veterans transitioning, anyone that's in the workspace. Everybody's saying no one's taking the time to really help the candidate qualify. They're going to see a lot of money come their way, and they're going to see a lot of turnover. But I think you might not get that high level percentage. I guarantee you're not going to be at 50. You might be at 70 or 80%. If you just do the upfront things and you follow through on that. You show them a runway for career development. You show them the runway to expand their career. Here's the other thing I'm hearing, and I was just having this discussion this weekend. I was at a family get together. It was my brother-in-law's nephew. He just graduated, and he's trying to figure out what the heck he wants to do. And I said, so he's like, it's all about inspiring my generation. It's about inspiring them what the quality of the work is. Because if you engage them and inspire them, they do care about that. Now their money expectations are a little out of whack, and that takes some adjustment. But I think what's happening is we got to show them what is the quality of the work. What are we doing to make a difference? That matters. What's the benefits? What's the sizzle? And people are like, oh, that's not that important. Yeah, it's really that important today. Because I mean, I can tell you multiple times where we as an external organization had a candidate that we're interviewing for company, I mean, colossal companies, the Amazons, the Googles, and we had a smaller client that was doing the same work. It was like a DevSecOps resource, way more money, way everything. We had him measure and gauge and gave him tactics to qualify and disqualify. And through that process of asking questions and empowering him, he went to a client that was drastically smaller, a little less money, but he learned through the work and the money they were offering that there was a lot more that the quality of life wasn't there. This individual wasn't going to be servicing the industry that he cared about. So I think it's a lot about really engaging the candidates. It's developing that meaningful relationship from the get-go.
Hmm.
And I think that's a very different thing. Everyone's like, well, we got to just see if they fit. Da, 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 da. No. Well, what is their goals? What is their objectives? Remember, this is people's lives. They spend what, 70-80% at work. So they got to like what they do. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I can get on as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this.
No, this is important. I mean, there's definitely this conversation with, or at least the perception that the young people coming out now, right? Like your nephew at the graduation party is an example. They just don't like to work, or like work hard. Like they seem
Yeah.
to be a little bit lax on just the attention to whatever they're doing and the effort output, right? And like
Mhm.
you take that kind of idea with the talent pool at that age level, you mix it in with, hey, younger people tend to need a little bit more guidance on in the earlier part of their career, and can you do that in a remote way, successfully or effectively? And then you roll it up with, well, if I can't train them up fast and I can't give them the guidance on the regular, and they're kind of off to their own devices in between the meetings in sessions like this, are you already doomed for failure? I mean, like now you're adding 3 factors that probably don't end well.
Well, and I think that's why I go back to if there's any chance you're going to stand with this, is the qualification and engaging from both sides, from the talent and the customer or the employer. You got to get them to better qualify and
Mhm.
better. And when I say better matchmake, because I think, and what I've seen, because I've personally experienced it, where it is hard today to engage and keep talent that wants to stay. It is not easy. It takes a lot of effort. That's why from my perspective, if you do some of the upfront efforts to
Mhm.
engage them and develop a roadmap and to get their buy-in, you stand at least a chance. I think the problem is people get discouraged and they're like, well, we're going to just have to hire 30 people and we know we're going to keep 5, or 5 will stick, or whatever
And
the
I've
number
seen
is.
that happen. I mean, if the companies that can afford to do that are
Yeah.
absolutely doing that.
Oh yeah. And the challenge with that is it's just you're not creating a culture that is going to retain people. And it's what we've changed that around is by doing these little things up front, and we stay with the people and find out what's going on. So I think part of it too is having other departments in organizations be checking in with they have the HR checking in on them. How are they doing? How are they engaging? Understanding where they're coming from. I mean, it's all I can read in a resume before I even submit it. I'll know if they're going to be where they're coming from and what their mindset is, because a resume tells me a story. So
Hmm.
then I go validate it. So if you know how to read the resumes, I think part of it too is HR and the recruiters and our recruiters do it as well, is they gotta adapt those resumes, not change content, but make it user friendly to the employer, so the employer could screen through it quickly and decipher if this is even going to be a fit, so they're not having to go spend a long period of time going through a ton of resumes that are just unreadable basically. And so I think there are little things you can do up front that can help, and regularly checking in by just with HR. I mean, I've seen that make a difference. And I mean, these are the things. I think if you put these things in place, it's not going to solve, it's not the I don't think I don't have a magic wand to fix everything. But I think if you engage them in the right way up front, you're going to resolve it. And I think
Mm.
there should be throughout it, HR should be asking the questions. Are you happy? Are you not happy? Why? What can we do differently? Because the worst thing is to lose talent. I mean, the bigger problem we're seeing today is not getting talent, it's retaining talent. That is
Mm.
the bigger challenge. Because if you lose talent quickly, the cost for getting the talent is just astronomical. And then worse yet is you start to lose key talent, and that tribal knowledge is not transferred. That's horrific for an organization. I mean, it's
Yeah.
devastating.
No, there's no question that um like the old, like maybe the, hey, we'll do a review on the 1 year and like that's it, right? Like apparently that's no longer working, right? Because that's like, I guess people are forced to do that, by the way, maybe not the right cadence, but
Yeah.
I think, like going back to the looking for the right thing. I mean, a lot of small businesses just don't have the knowledge, right? And quite frankly, and I'm sure in your business, you've seen this a lot. People kind of lie on their resumes, right? Their job history is not accurate. All of a sudden, companies that they were working at completely don't show up. All of a sudden, the dates were
Oh,
fudged.
yeah.
And now, like, do you even have? And there's these subscriptions that you can sign up for to try and help you with some of it. But at the end of the day, like, you know, it's, how do you even know that the person that you're, flipping through is like legitimately telling you the right things? I assume you have some sort of magic there, right? Because you're doing
Yeah,
this
we do.
at
And
volume.
the real part of that magic is making sure your recruiting team internally or externally absolutely understands what they're hiring for.
Mm.
I'd say a significant portion of the recruiters post the jobs and, oh, it looks like you check all the boxes, but really doesn't understand the nuances of the job. It
Right.
really does take some time to understand the nuance. I mean, you need to be able to ask the right questions. Um, my lead recruiter, he'll come on the line and he wows me at this point because I know a lot and I taught him. But when it comes to technical stuff, he's surpassed me at this point. But he'll impress hiring managers. I remember we were working, I think 2 weeks ago with a $500 million company, and the hiring manager was like, "These are the best questions ever asked. I've never seen anyone that had this much insight." And I mean,
Mm.
it's because he actually took the time to understand the job. So part of that is having a external team, someone like us, because we understand it and we live, breathe it. Or if you do it internally, generally have a recruiting team that actually understands what they're recruiting for. I was recruiting for a colossal company, and I asked the HR hiring manager, well, what are you? Because it was a sales role. What are you selling? They're like, I got to get back to you. I'm like, what? And this happens all the time because they don't understand what they're being asked to recruit. They got a general idea and like, oh, I'll just post this and move on my way. But they really don't understand a lot of times what they're recruiting. And that's inherently dangerous. You really got to understand. And that's why it's so critically important to get those recruiters externally, internally, however you approach it, in front of that hiring manager so they can really hone in on what it is, because there's a lot of stuff on a job description. That's a lot of noise. Yeah, it's nice to have, but what is it that you actually need that's quintessential? And because all that stuff on a resume, on a job description, let's say, that's going to be at a certain dollar amount where it might be way beyond your budget. Now, let your budget's here. So and that's a lot. It's going to be a lot of differences and compromising on figuring out exactly what you need. That's what an internal recruiter should do, or an external recruiter should do, is go,
Mm.
okay, you're asking for the moon and the stars, and you have $100,000 budget to spend for this, and the reality is you're looking for 140 to 160%. Well, that we can't make them up. The reality is there has to be some compromise, and there has to have some realistic, hard discussions about what this means. And by getting that and going there, that starts off things on the right footprint because you're going after the right people. And the worst thing to do that I've seen, and probably I cringe, is when a candidate is submitted at a certain amount, and then the internal or external customer says, "Well, no, we think he's here." I'm like, well, even if you get him, he's going to leave. So it's if they're asking for a certain amount, be prepared to pay that if you're even screening them that. If you say you're going to pay them less than what they're asking for, even with market demands, you're not going to keep them. They'll move on. So it is keeping them under the right pretenses, but it's really understanding these jobs. And
have you seen any success with, bringing people in for more of like a, hey, technical interview, right? Like, let me show you what a day in the life looks like, right? So you can see it before, because we can describe it to you until we're blue in the face, but like pictures worth 1,000 words kind of thing.
I think that's a great idea, actually. Anything that's going to get them a better insight to the opportunity. Remember, you got to let them screen you as much as they're screening, as much as you're screening them. Even in our interviews, we have them use the basic thermometer test from 1 to 10 to gauge their level of interest. And at the end, we're going to ask, well, why is it a 6 or a 7 versus an 8 that you're totally on board, or a 9 out of a 10? Because we want to understand why they be a no. Or they go in, they see it, they love it. They're like, yes, I want this more than anything. That gives them a taste. So I'm all for it. Or they can do something where they're shadowing through half a day of, working through something like this, a Zoom call or something where they're able to remote in and see and do the work, and some collaboration. So anytime they can get the chance to do that, I'm all for it. I personally myself, I give homework to my folks that I'm interviewing. And my boss is like, what? Yeah, I want to gauge how they're doing. I want to see how they approach things. I want to see how their thought process works. That's the other thing with having them do those tests. It's going to show you how they think, and it's going to determine their problem solving skills and their ability to work through those challenges and figure out how they communicate upwards and how they communicate downwards. And that's really one of the big things from a soft skills side.
So
So I'm all about it.
along those lines, do you put any credence into the personality test, the disc test, there's all these different,
Yes, I think they're important because it's going to shed light into how they approach things. I'm personally of the mindset, I have my candidates use the STAR method, and that situation, task, action, result. I want them to prepare an example, a previous performance that's related to the job they're going into, because I want them not to be thinking on the fly of an example. I want that example there, and then they are able to adapt it to the questions that are being asked. So yes, I do think those tools are good, but I don't think I think they're part of the decision making. But I think it's empowering the candidate and the client to both come together to be on the same page and have a discussion where it's not the candidate just, hey, this is what I do, but the candidate taking the time to understand the challenges and the pains that you are going through and why this is open, so they can really start to see how they fit in and how they would fit in for you and how you would fit in for them. So I think those are the things I would want more of.
What happens, and by the way, I'm sure this scenario happens probably for you multiple times per day. What happens when you have a junior level person that's taking a leap into, a higher paying role with a lot more responsibility, and like, not every person makes a good manager, right? Not every person, like maybe they're a rock star at their role, and the second you put them in charge of anything else, like it falls down, right? So like, there's a lot of, the cliche is more money, more problems, right? The more you're wanting to get paid, the more responsibility I expect you to handle. And if you've never done that before, am I not taking a risk by paying you this massive jump without you having been able to prove that you can do the job, kind of thing?
Well, I really don't think a lot of organizations I don't see them doing that, taking that big of a risk to move them. I think they're looking for that individual that has the skills, and it's a slight move upward. I think that's why it's so quintessentially important to have a candidate pair things and really understand the job description that they're walking into, so they ask the right questions. And as the questions they're asking, it's going to shed light onto if they have the technical abilities in combination what you're saying with having them come on in. I'm all for people doing homework outside to see, I'm gauging their level of interest. So I think some of that is done through understanding before they get to the interview what is the idea, what is the focus of the interview, and that happens even before a candidate is recruited. That happens in the qualification of the job description with myself, then with a lead recruiter, and really honing in on what is critical. What is it? What is it about the leadership skills you're looking for? What hasn't worked? What would work? What so it's really going in and understanding what it is before you even bring that resume to the table, is asking these questions up front. Okay, so you're looking for someone, if we were to find someone they could move up. Well, what has worked in the past for you? What hasn't worked? So I think it starts even before you get to making that decision and seeing that person. It happens in the initial qualification of the job description and making sure the recruiter really understands the technical side and the soft skills side. And I mean, I think also personally, the resume should be a checklist. Yep, has all these things. Now you're going to the interview to validate, and also they start to gauge, is this person going to work in my organization? And I think that's why the upfront work is so critical, because if you don't do this upfront, you're going to face it on the back end, and that's why I think you see a lot of failures.
Hmm.
That's my experience, and I'm go ahead.
Are you seeing companies kind of hedge their bets in the structure of the deal, right? Hey, we'll give you a signing bonus, but you have to stick around for X amount of time, or you have to pay that back. Or, hey, we're willing to give you this, benefit. Sometimes it's education, benefits. Sometimes it's, hey, if you hit a certain milestone, then, within the first 6, 8, 12 months, right, then this happens. If nothing other than, I don't know, 90 days never seems like it's anywhere near enough to make sure
It's
that the person fits.
I think that's moving away. I mean, the work that we're talking about, it's going to take them 6 months to a year to come online, realistically, or even longer. What I'm hearing from the MSP community when I talk to them, it's more like 2 years before they start to really see the benefits of the cost for bringing these folks on. So it is that 90-day period is, yeah, great, but that's like, it's funny you bring that up, because one of the questions I actually had the candidates ask in their interview is, hey, where do you see me in 30, 60, 90, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Have them paint a picture of what they want to see, so the candidate can say, okay, yeah, I see myself that way, or they get a picture. So a lot of it, I think, is also prepping the candidates to ask the right questions. And I believe personally, if a candidate leaves in less than a year, it's a six-figure mistake, and either in time, morale, and just overall. My belief is that's what it's costing organizations on the minimum, because it costs you externally, internally, it costs you in all kinds of different resources. You have to bring higher level folks in to fix it, then a salesperson to fix it, damaged morale, both to your client and your client base and your internal staff. So the right hire is so critical today. And I mean, nothing is perfect. We're dealing with the one unconstant, which is human beings. I mean, you can't control that element, is you do have a human being factor. So I think that's why the matchmaking part of this up front is so important. It might not be the solution or the magic wand, but it is certainly going to give you an added advantage that I see that's not happening a lot of the times. And I see the failures of why talent fails. And it pains me to watch when talent fails, because I believe we
I
can
mean,
avoid that.
I agree with you, by the way, and it happens more than I feel like it doesn't in your world. It seems like it's opposite because you figured out like a science or a recipe to it. But I see way more the opposite side, which is it doesn't work out more often than it works out. And again, coming back to like depending on what you're hiring for, there's this concept in MSP land that if you have the right core team, almost like an NFL team, right? You have the right core players on the field, that you can put all these tools and systems and automation in place, that when you're bringing on, you can bring on more draft level 1 guys, right? Rather than hiring level 2, level 3, very expensive engineers, right? And like,
Mhm.
that's definitely been a marketing message to the MSP community that, hey, you don't need all these expensive people. You can do things in such a way that you can just have a lot of inexpensive people. I don't know if that's ever played out though.
I mean, I always believe from when I was working, I remember the most successful MSP, and I grew it in the 90s, or not the 90s, the early 2000s. And I was part of it right up to the the housing collapse and
Oh,
all of
wait.
that. Oh wait. And it was good I mean, we had our core, but it's always the weakest link. That was always what hurt, was the weakest link. So we were always trying to up that weak link. And I see it doesn't matter the skill set or not the skill set. I think you can have those superstars in, but you still need to have those weakest links. Can be so devastating. If you have someone, I personally would much rather have someone that has the mindset of, hey, I want to learn and grow, versus I'm really good at what I do and I know more than all of you. I would take the person that I can teach and grow any day of the week over the person that's not that way. Now, if a person can back up what they're saying, and I've worked with talent that can do that, and it appears arrogant, but you quantify it and you clarify it, and they back up what they're saying, yeah, those are good folks too. So I think it's a balancing act, but I think you have to be careful with bringing in lower level folks that aren't properly qualified. I think I think it all goes back to making sure you're properly qualifying what you're looking for. And I think that can avoid a lot of the pain that organizations are going through, and then develop a process for in keeping them engaged after they're onboarded. And I mean, I think if you do these things up front, you're going to
I
avoid a lot of
I
pain.
feel like people, and David, you don't have to take my word on it. Go to any Reddit or Discord,
Mhm.
Facebook, Slack. I mean, there's so many of them out there. If they're going to Chat GPT to write an agreement, probably not in a good place. But back to this side of the aisle, which is
Yeah.
they're going to somebody else and saying, "Hey, can you send me a copy of your job requisition, template? Can you send me a copy of your first 90 days onboarding process? Can you?" And like, they're just borrowing this from everybody else, right? And like, they don't have a plan. They're just taking somebody else's plan and trying to see if it fits, right? I mean, I think this is part
Mhm.
of the problem.
Well, and that's going to happen. But a good HR person or recruiter, internally or externally, is going to go, okay, I'm reading this. What is it? Because I hear that a lot, by the way, that they're cutting and pasting, and the HR department has no clue what they're hiring for. And or the hiring manager is just trying to get someone in the door, and they're throwing a job description together. That's why it's the responsibility of the recruiter to go back. Okay, I get why you did it this way and what you're looking for. What is it specifically that you're trying to do? And if we find it, how quickly are you prepared to move? Because if I got the right job description and everything's right, are you ready to move in 24 hours, 48 hours? Because the right talent, that's what they're gonna, because you're hunting for the right talent. You're not waiting for it. You have them for a very small period of time. And then you grab them, you interview, you get them, you get it done in a week or two, you're going to get a good resource. The challenge is, yeah, everyone's trying to cut a corner and expedite, and there's a lot of tools that do it. And you can go to Chat GTP, you can go copy and paste everyone's job descriptions and get the same thing. If you do the same thing, I mean, what's the definition of insanity? I mean,
Do the same
it's
thing
kind of
over and over
over and
again.
over again, you're going to get the same result. You
Yeah.
have to be willing to learn and grow and evolve. And I think that happens with the candidate, that happens with the hiring managers. And that's what we're looking for in talent. Are they willing to be able to be constantly teachable and constantly seeing how to do this just a different way? Internally, we meet every week to figure out how to streamline our processes, how to become far more effective in everything we do. And it takes a really hard look. It's not pleasant. It's not always a fun, happy call every Friday afternoon when we have this. But we're looking at this to be able to do the job better for our customers. And I think that has to be looked at from an MSP organizational side of it. And if you don't know how to do it, go find a firm. I'm not promoting myself, or find someone that can help you do this and ask the right questions. Because if
So
you're not asking,
let me rapid
go
fire a
ahead.
couple of ones because I know we're getting towards the end.
Yeah.
Have you seen, this is the last one on this side, which is, have you seen success with people being incentivized, like existing personnel, staff, employees, saying, hey, if you can help us fill this role, go out there, see, you hit your network, and like we'll give you a bonus or a spiff if you find somebody to fill the role. Has that been successful?
I mean, sometimes I don't think it's as successful as people want because they don't know how to screen people. They know what works, so there's some success with it, but are they able to really get you that screened exact talent? Now, the reason I think it doesn't work is not because of the fault of the person going out there and looking. I don't think they're given it the accurate instructions to go out there and get what they want.
Mm,
So if the job description is correctly qualified, yeah, I would be all for that. However, most times the job descriptions aren't qualified correctly. There's a lot of noise. Well, the guy's like, well, there's all this stuff, and I think I know what you guys want because this is what I'm doing. But you might have a longer range strategy that that person that's going out there doesn't really get. He looks at the job description, so not all the pieces are correctly explained to them. So I does that kind of explain why that it does work, but here's why it might not.
yeah, if it's not set up to succeed from before you even go down that road, it probably doesn't. That's fair. Um, what is the going? I don't know. I guess I don't know if there's a standard rate in recruiting land to like use an outside agency like yourselves to. Is it a percentage? Is there a flat fee? Like, I don't know how it works, but if like somebody were going to fill any job role, could be a 50K job role, 100K job role, 200K, whatever it is, like, how does the math work?
Sure. There's two ways the math works. It works. Are you going to hire? Are you going to now? There's one model where it's the contract to hire. You allow the firm that you're using to hire them, putting them on their W-2 for a 6-month period, and you amortize that cost over down to an hourly basis. A lot of organizations like that because there's a lot more command and control, easier to get rid of if the talent isn't working, and you're getting the test before you buy. The other model where a lot of organizations, when they're hiring those key talent roles that they need to make sure that they're going to stay, that's a direct placement model. And, the numbers have been going up. I mean, what we're seeing a minimum is 25%, and that went from 20%. So, and I've been
Of the annual salary.
annual salary, just their base salary, no incentives, no bonuses. And I've heard organizations go as high as 35 and 40%. It depends on the skill set that you're going after and the desperation you're in. And if an organization is doing right by a company, it should be role by role. Hey, this role is going to be contract. This role is going to be direct. And some of the things that you're going to need to think about if you want them in a certain market, relocation. Here's the one thing I will say about relocation. Everyone's 5,000, 5,000. That's not cutting it anymore. If you want to get a person to really relocate, it's $10,000 to $15,000 realistically for those key folks. And that's just the reality of what's happened now.
So I hire somebody for 100 grand. I pay you 25 grand, because let's say it's 25%. I'm just picking the number that you just said. What happens if they don't work out?
That's why firms need to have replacements in place, replacement process in place. And that's why we strongly encourage a lot of firms to move more to that contract to perm model, because they're paying on an hourly basis. So they can determine at any point in time if that person's not working, and we're going to be able to backfill probably faster. And the reason faster is we're going to have more pulse on what's going on a day-to-day basis with us managing it. Now, the backfill, if the job is done right, I mean, we don't lose people. We've lost a handful of people, and it's very out of the norm. But that's because when you do the right qualification up front, you avoid a lot of this. Now, this is the other thing I would say. No firm should be ever, like, our perspective is we only get paid if we perform. So think of it that way. It costs you absolutely nothing unless we perform. So we're going to do our very best to make sure we're performing. And any firm should do that. And if they're not, then shame on them, because they're just wasting time. Because, like, if we're not performing and we're not delivering, you have nothing to lose. It's always on the firm to lose. Now, a lot of organizations, well, that's so much money, we could just hire someone internally. Well, yes, you can. The challenge that exists with that is, are you going to get the right recruiting talent that can actually go out there and do that job? So there's two schools of thought, and you have to decide which one works better for you. I've worked on both sides, so I've seen it both ways. And I think when you have an individual that knows how to qualify an opportunity is more important than anything in this whole process. It's probably the most quintessential thing. The recruiters got to understand it internally or externally, and they
No,
got to get to the answers.
yeah, I mean, we're just applying I'm an expert at this particular thing. You're not. You could go to the job boards and try and figure it out on your own, or you can let somebody who does this on a regular, like, get it to the point where you have somebody in front of you that should fit the role. I get that. I guess, part of the other problem is doing that part-time usually ends up in failure, right? Doing anything part-time tends to not work well, right? So, hey, like, I'll go through resumes when I have time. I mean, like, I think that's probably, especially, by the way, when you do the job boards or the LinkedIn jobs or whatever, it's like
Oh, yeah.
you got like
So you get
1,000
50
responses.
resumes.
Yeah. And you're like, where do I start?
And that's why it's critical to have someone that knows how to qualify an opportunity, because if it's internal, external, if they know how to qualify it correctly, they're going to get you 1, 2, maybe 3 resumes, and then they're hiring. Isn't that a much better? So now you can actually hone in on exactly what you want versus having to sift through and maybe find someone in the diamond in the rough. And that's the difference. And I mean, you can do it yourself, but there's a cost for doing that for yourself. How much time do you want to dedicate to doing that? And do you have you quantified and qualified exactly what you want? And it's sometimes, I mean, it's us just asking questions and they're going, oh wow, I never thought of that. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, I do want that. Or no, I really don't need that. So that's part of it. And when you have someone that knows how to qualify a rec, it should take 10, 15 minutes. Like, we were just qualified 5, 6 roles in about half hour, 45 minutes client last week. And
What
these
do
were
they
all,
say? If you do something for 10,000 hours, you're an expert.
yeah, I've done it for a while,
Yeah.
more than I would like to say, but yeah.
Where do
Um,
people find out more information about your company, and, like, maybe if they want to talk a little bit through, something in terms of maybe they have open job roles, or maybe they're looking for people right now and they're struggling. What's the best
I mean,
way?
they can always reach out to me. I'm happy to help. You can just go to david@diriga.com. Everything's going to probably filter through me anyhow, in some capacity. And that's just an easy way. It's david@diriga.com, or you can go to our website, diriga.com, and you can just press the recruiting selection on the navigation.
Awesome.
I love I love answering your questions and helping. I mean, this is just to kind of tie everything back together. I live for this. This is what I do for a living. This is what I love. I love help changing organizations, situations, and really providing quality candidates and helping them make the right choices. That's what our job is to help candidates make the right choice for their families, for themselves. This changes their whole entire life if we do this the right way. And
I
so
agree. David, we could probably keep going, but
oh,
I know
absolutely.
we're a little bit over the hour.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, because, quite frankly, trying to demystify this whole conversation just a little bit, because we've all heard the horror stories, right? And, like, a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of the policies, procedures, handbooks, personnel decisions, they create like a battered person syndrome, right? Where they've been through so many failures, they're almost hesitant to, like, keep going. But maybe that's just because they don't
It,
have the
it
right people in place in it to
you
help them
know,
get to the right people.
I agree. And part of it too is that, you know, I've experienced all the things I'm going to tell you, and the pains you're telling, been through it, both
Mhm.
in my career, working as within the MSP side, working people I've hired, and I've seen the frustration. I've seen the bad hires because you cut on wages and then months later they're gone, and you're now sitting there with a tremendous amount of money out of pocket. And I've experienced it from all the different sides. So my dad always said I've probably forgotten more than most know in a particular space, and it's starting to happen in the MSP space these days. And when it
100%.
comes to recruiting,
Appreciate
yeah,
your
I'm
time,
happy to
David.
help.
This is
Thank you.
recorded. We're going to get this online on mspinitiative.com. Again, we'll make sure you come back, guys, 1:00 Eastern time, Tuesdays, Thursdays, or just download the podcast when it's posted. You guys can rewind, fast forward, and do the thing. So, David, appreciate your time. Catch you on the flip side, my friend.
Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it and honor it. Thank you. Good luck.